In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a pieced quilt-as-you-go block that is also reversible. Hi, I'm Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts. Okay, so that sounds like a lot we're going to learn today, and it kind of is, but it's not really that difficult. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the quilt-as-you-go method to make a quilt block that is going to be pieced on the front and pieced on the back, which isn't typical. Usually you have a solid piece of fabric on the back. So this works best if you're making a simple pieced block, 4-patch, 9-patch. I'm going to be making a courthouse steps block. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And there's a few things that make this easier than, well, that can make it easier for it. Let's just put it that way, okay? And the key there really is to have all your pieces pre-cut to the same size. Not each piece is the same size, but the front and back pieces are going to be the same size. Well, just follow me. You'll find out what I mean in just a minute. So, courthouse steps. If you're not familiar with that, you start with a center piece of fabric, much like a log cabin, but then rather than a log cabin, which is building going around in this type of a direction, you're going to be building them the sides, the top, the sides, the top and bottom, and continue out that way. So it's a similar method of construction, but a different look when you're done. And I'm going to be working on this piece of batting as my foundation. Of course, the batting is the center of the quilt sandwich, and it will be here as well. But we are going to start with a piece that's larger than the finished block that you want to make. So in my case, I'm going to be making a, I should say, unfinished block. It's 9.5, a 9-inch finished block. But I'm using a piece of batting that's larger than that. I think this is a 12.5-inch piece of batting. So when I start with the batting, the first thing I need to do is I need to find the center of it because we're going to be building this block from the center out. So I need to make sure that the two pieces of fabric, one on the front, one on the back, are going to line up exactly with each other. If they are not lined up with each other, if one fabric is skewed a little differently on the back than the front, and I'll just show you here, I'll be talking about markings on fabric in just a minute, but if on the back I had a piece that was, say, sticking out a little bit more like this, as I go to add things on with the stitching, it may not catch the fabric on the back. So you need to start off with them right in the same position, front and back. And how do we do that? Well, not difficult either. I said I started off with a 12.5-inch piece of batting. So the center of that would be 12.5 divided by 2 would be 6.25. So I'm going to make a line in the center at 6.25. So I'm just lining up the 6.25-inch line on my ruler with the edge of the batting. And I'm just going to draw a little bit of a line. And I'm using a friction marker pen here. You can use whatever erasable marker you want to use, but you need to be able to see it. Okay, and so I'm using a darker color. And then I'm going to go the other way as well, of course. And then we're going to have a nice crosshair in the middle. That's going to be the center of the batting. And I need to make sure I do this on the front and on the back, right? Because we want to have that exact center. And again, it's the same size on the back. It doesn't change. So we're looking at 6.25 again. My batting is a little skewy at the bottom here, but we're still getting the right size here. So all right. So that should be the same front and back. And now I need to put that piece of fabric on the front and on the back, right? And they need to be aligned as well. So how do I do that? Well, same thing. I take my fabric that's going to be in the center and I marked it. This is a 3.5-inch square. So the center is 1 3/4. And I've marked the crosshairs as well. And you can see how that would line up with my batting. Okay, but this is the wrong side up, which is not what I want, of course. So I actually have marked the other side. And I used, in this case, I just used some soap because I like to use soap whenever I can, and you can definitely see it on this fabric. So I can line this all up, make sure it's where I want it to be. If it's off a teeny bit, it doesn't, that's okay, it doesn't matter. And then I want to make sure it stays, right? Because I'm going to flip this over and work on the other side. So you can put some glue dots. I'm using a little bit of seam-align glue here to make sure that's going to stay down. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the back side, or the other side of the fabric. And yes, my crosshair is going to disappear when I do that, but that's okay because I've already got this down, okay? Now, I might have to mark the back again, but that's okay. So probably the best thing to do is do your front first, get your fabric piece down, then flip it over and do it. Because if you're using a pen that's erasable, like what I'm using, the friction pen that's erasable by heat, you might lose your crosshairs there. So instead of having to mark twice, like I'm going to have to do. Okay, I'm going to do that on the back, get it on as well, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like, and then we're going to start adding fabric strips to this block. So I've got both my blocks on the batting, so the front and the back. All right, so they're both centered on that batting. So the next step is to start adding the fabric strips. And by the way, if you want to make this block in the same size as I am, check the description below because I've included the sizes for all the pieces that you need to make this block. So I have the fabrics here. I put them in the right order so I don't get mixed up. But basically they're going from smaller to larger, so hopefully you wouldn't get mixed up. All right, but I've put them all together, as I said, in the right order. And I'm using some of the colors, some of the fabrics, I should say, the same on the front as on the back, and some are a bit different. So, you know, add a bit of variety. So we're going to start off with the white fabrics, and I guess I just need one probably, right, to start. But I need to have fabric on the front and the back, right? So just like we normally do, you're going to line up your fabric that you want to add to that center on the right side is what we're doing here. And then of course I have to do this on the back as well. So again, you can either glue it if that works for you. You could use seam-align glue, but then I'd have to run back and forth my iron. But of course the easy way to do this is to use pins, right? So I'm going to stick a pin in here for now. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over. Now, this is the tricky part, okay? Make sure you're on the correct side. So while I'm on the right side on the top, when I flip it over, I'm on the left side on the bottom. Now, a couple ways you can tell that. First off, I can flip back and forth and look, but I've got that pin in there, right? So I can take a look at that pin and go, yeah, that's where I'm going to be stitching. So let's line this all up here. And I don't like to fuss with things too much. So I am just going to take another pin and put it in here. And I'm actually going to pin these. I'm going to move that front pin. I'm going to pin it over further. I don't want to stitch over my pin at all, and that could happen with what we're doing here. So I'm just going to move it way over out of the seam allowance. It's still going to hold it in place, but I'm not going to have to worry about running over the pin. Just put that in a little bit better and try to not put it in my finger. Okay. All right, so always double check. You know, you can never double check too many times unless you're someone who really likes to seam rip, you know. So we've got in the front, the back, we look like we're good. So what I'm doing now is I'm using the quilt as you go method, all right? So we're going to stitch the pieces together with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we are going to quilt that fabric after we've opened it up, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm using the same thread for piecing as I'm going to be doing for quilting. Just keep it easy. If you wanted to switch and use a different thread for the quilting, you sure could. But for demonstration purposes and for efficiency, let's not do that. So I am going to just double check and make sure everything's set up correctly here. A few things to change on my computer. I'm using the Janome CM17 today, so I've got the HP2 foot on, which is a really nice kind of a walking foot 1/4 inch stitch. So I'm going to try and start really close to the edge of the fabric. Okay, I don't want to start too far off in the batting for this particular technique. And just a 1/4 inch seam stitched along. Okay, and then I can cut my threads. All right, I'm going to take out the pin there, flip it over. Oh, good. It got stitched on the back as well. Nice. Okay. Whew. Okay. Now, let's open this up, right? So you could press this if you'd like. I'm just using a seam roller here, my Violet Craft seam roller that I like to use, and we're going to press those open, right? Alrighty. So, first piece of fabric added on, and it worked properly. And now, remember I said we had to do some quilting. So you've got, make sure both your pieces are open. And, when you're only working with one piece of fabric like this on the batting, it's going to stick fine. You don't have to worry about it. And then you just add some quilting however much you want. If you want to increase your stitch length, I'm going up to 3, you could certainly do that, and then just quilt. And again, I'm not going too far off into that batting. I'm not going to do too much quilting here because I just wanted to demonstrate for you what it's going to look like. Okay. Okay, I have a little bobble in my thread there that I might have to address. But in any case, this is what it would look like. And so you've got it quilted on the front and quilted on the back. And then, of course, you have to continue building your courthouse steps. So, as I mentioned before, you're building them side to side. So you would be going to the other side on the top. This happens to be the left side. And what side is it going to be on the back? Do you know? Well, it's going to be the right side. So it's always going to be opposite. It's like we're doing mirror image, really, right? Not sure if that's exactly what you call it in this situation, but that's kind of what's happening, right? So we're going to put these in here, get them pinned down again. Use my 1/4 inch seam. I'm really close to my other pin there. There we go. Either that or I'm using a dull pin, perhaps. Anyway, okay, so stitch with the 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you have increased your stitch length, this is the time to take it back to whatever the default is on your machine for piecing, and go again. All right. And again, we would have to open up these pieces and give them a little bit of a press to help them lay down. And again, that batting kind of helps too because they like to stick to the batting. Which one am I working on? There we go. And then it's time to do more quilting. Changing my stitch length and continuing on here. Now, you don't have to do the same quilting on both sides either, okay? You could do something totally different over here if you wanted to, but let's keep it simple, shall we? So this is what I've got so far, and I'm going to continue building this block out, adding pieces next to the top and bottom, and you'll see these are a little bit bigger. And of course, you'll put them right sides together and stitch one on the top and the bottom. Let's not forget the bottom, okay? So you're going to put that one on the bottom too, stitch them both together with a 1/4 inch seam, open them up, do some quilting, and then you would go to the top, 1/4 inch seam, front and back, right? Open it up, stitch, and you're going to continue to build this out. So I'm going to go and finish this block, and then I'm going to come back and show you what it looks like as I get towards the end of it. The block is now almost done. It needs to be trimmed down, of course. And here's one side, and here's the other. So you have created a pieced reversible block using the quilt as you go method. So you could just trim this down to, in this case, 9.5 inches, and then you can make as many blocks similarly if you'd like, and join them together. And because it's reversible, and you can see that I've chosen, you know, not the same fabrics exactly, but the same kind of colors in each of those fabrics, right? With the hot pink in the middle of the white kind of creamy yellowy color, orange and blue on both sides. They look kind of similar, but they don't have to, right? So you could make one side maybe like this with some bright, fresh colors. And maybe when you flip it over the other side, it's seasonal colors. Maybe it's fall. Maybe it's winter, maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's Easter, who knows? But it's a good way to use up scrap fabrics and have a nice reversible quilt, all created at one time using the Quilt As You Go method. Thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And while I've showed you how to make a reversible pieced block using the Quilt As You Go method, there are other Quilt As You Go blocks I can make too that aren't reversible. But if you're wondering what those are, don't worry, I've got you covered. Check out this video I've included just for you. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.